interesting story of how Regression Games got started and where we got to today. So really we have to go all the way back to, I guess, my freshman year at MIT. So really the first step on that journey was thinking about what are the problems we want to solve, going back to kind of what I was just talking about with, identifying the problem. And so we talked to a lot of studios about the problems where they're facing this every day. I really want us to be the standard when it comes to automated game QA. For us, I see this as like a real opportunity to really define like what is the way that people should be doing automated QA. Definitely think that AI is solving real problems. I mean, I'm using AI day to day in various parts of my workday, and so even there, I see it like having real value.
Welcome everyone to our new episode of the Game Makers Lounge. It's me, AJ, and CJD, hosting a dear friend, Aaron, who's someone I met, during our A16Z rendezvous at the San Francisco office. He's someone I've kept in touch with, both as first-time founders. We've kind of kept each other in the loop. And I've loved seeing his progress over the last couple of years. So Aaron, why don't you take the mic and introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. So nice to meet everyone. My name is Aaron, founder of Regression Games. It's a company I founded in May of 2022. We did a seed round led by NEA and also with participation from A16Z Games. And we're working on tools for automating testing in games using AI agents and building all the tools around AI agents to make testing effective.
Super cool. So Aaron, the part of the story that really I think is interesting for viewers is your journey, right? So walk us through how did you fundraise, how did you talk to VCs, but more importantly, I think like the area that really excites me is you started your company, but then you were still navigating the space. You were trying to figure out what is going to resonate, right? That journey I think is so important for a lot of other entrepreneurs trying to start their company. I would love to know more about it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely an interesting story of how Regression Games got started and where we got to today. So really we have to go all the way back to, I guess, my freshman year at MIT, where I participated in a competition called Battle Code. So Battle Code is an annual competition held at MIT where the whole idea is that you build AI agents for a game that they build custom every year. And so I had a lot of fun with that. I did it with one of my friends, Dylan, in college as well. And we really enjoyed that experience, and it ended up happening such that we actually got to help develop that competition in our junior and senior years of being at school as well. And so I've always really been interested in this idea of AI agents playing games, and always been a very big gamer, and also very interested in AI as well. I got my master's in AI at MIT as well. And so I always knew I wanted to start a startup, probably at the intersection of those two sort of categories. And so for 4 years after I graduated, I worked at a company called Instabase, also an A16Z backed company, where we worked on document processing for usually large banks. So we'd build applications where we'd extract information from documents. So imagine you want to do, extracting information from a pay stub or a bank statement or things like that. We did a lot of work on how we can use machine learning techniques to extract the information. And this was, the period before GPT, so it's definitely a very different time, like building out models and trying to extract the information. So,
So are those things where, like in Bank of America, you can like take a picture of the check and you guys extract the information?
Yeah, exactly like that.
Is that pretty much what?
Yeah. So exactly that. How can we take a picture of a document, whether it's scanned or an image or a PDF, and then extract all information from it, especially from unstructured documents, was the big focus because there's a wide variety of checks, wide variety of pay stubs and documents like that. So, so I spent 4 years there working on the systems for actually doing that, whether that be training machine learning models, fine tuning them, and then eventually deploying them and getting those to the customers. And around my 4-year mark, myself and my friend Dylan, who I did Battle Code with, started to think more about different startup ideas, and we're thinking a lot about Battle Code. And we realized, why isn't this idea of AI competitions like more of a thing? At that point, AI was growing, more people are learning how to code. And so it sort of just made sense that, hey, why don't we just try to take this idea and try to go mainstream with it? And so, that was kind of like where the idea came from for Regression Games. And we actually started off with building AI tournaments for games. And so that was sort of the basis of the company when I went into the round. I eventually ended up founding it on my own rather than with my friend. And Yes, we did that round in May of 2022. Really hit it off with the investors with this idea of making a platform for building out these AI agents. And part of the original pitch was to think about AI agents for game studios in general as well. It wasn't just only just a sort of a B2C sort of like a gaming sort of startup. There's also this idea of like how can we provide tooling to other places as well, to actual companies. Yeah, that's how the company started off. We started building out this platform for competing with AI in games, and having done
Were you dead set on starting a company
yeah
at the
yeah.
time?
So
Like,
I've always wanted to start my own company. This probably goes way back to even like in high school. I always like was thinking about like, oh, I want to start a startup. I want to build a company. Especially throughout
yeah,
college, I did a lot of little like startup things. So I helped. For instance, when I was up in Boston, I got a random cold email in a there's a mailing list that I was part of, and they're looking for a developer for an Android app. And I was like, oh, let me go, try to help out this startup, like build this app. And so that was like my first foray into the startup world. And I did little tiny projects like that all throughout college. Eventually, I started actually my own little company called Vontech Software, basically as like a holding company to do like, a lot of the contract work I was doing at the time for various people. And so that's sort of my
yep.
first exploration into doing a startup. But yeah, always wanted to build something awesome and start a company. So yeah.
I think it's great that you have. So AI is obviously like one of those hot topics for VCs. It's kind of like the crypto at one point, and
Yeah.
even now it's coming back a little bit. But you are not just some product person trying to find a problem for AI to solve. You went to school for AI. You actually studied this thing, and you have practical experience using it. So I mean, it's good to see AI used practically and
Yeah.
not just some weird idea that is gaining traction because
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, and
hot
that's something
topic.
I've always been interested in. Is like when I think about AI, I don't really think about like the hype of these cool models that we can start using for any random use case, right? I think about it in terms of the more practical things of what problems can we actually solve, and I guess even like my master thesis, which I guess is actually pretty related to what we're working on now. It was all about the idea of how can we use more like simple AIs to do accessibility testing in mobile apps. So it was all about how can we
Hmm.
automatically explore an app for mainly accessibility testing, like finding issues for people with disabilities. And so that's sort of my first foray into actually trying to apply AI like in a practical way. And so I think that was a good foundation for at least what I'm working on now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, CJD raises a really good topic, though. I mean, in all this AI noise, I would love to hear your perspective. Like, do you think it's noise? Do you think it's
Mhm.
hype? Do you think no, it's real? Yes, there are obviously people going and creating rappers over ChatGPT. But how do you see
Yep.
this wave?
Yeah, so yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I definitely think that AI is solving real problems. I mean, I'm using AI day to day in various parts of my workday, and so even there, I see it like having real value. But I think the main thing that founders or builders would want to think about is what's the actual use case they're trying to solve, what's the actual problem they're trying to solve, and that's actually kind of how we arrived, at least at Regression Games, at working on QA automation for game studios. We identified it as an actual like real pain point that's hard to solve for a lot of these studios, and so that's kind of the way I think about it. I think more of it as AI is a tool to solve a problem, and really you want to start with the problem in the first place. Don't really try to go backwards from the
Yeah.
technology to finding an area to apply it in. And sometimes that can work out right, but often it's much
Yep.
better to actually start with a real use case. By talking to actual people who are having these problems in the first place. So.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
All right, so you started a company, you had an idea, you had a vision, and then walk us through your next year. How were you talking to game studios? How difficult was it to access these game studios, and how was your
Yep.
product changing?
Yeah, so I guess going back to kind of like when we initially started the company, and like I mentioned, we were working on this platform for doing AI tournaments, and we worked on that for about a year or so. And our first tournament was a modded Minecraft game where you build an agent to play capture the flag.
Hmm.
And so we had a few participants in that, people actually trying it out, building bots, and we had a little tournament at the end. You can find that on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But after that, like we started thinking more about this idea of how can we apply these tools to game studios in general. I always think that the consumer idea of AI agents playing for tournaments is a lot of fun. I'm a very big fan of esports and just competitive gaming in general, so always found that to be pretty interesting. But at least for that stage of the company, we realized, hey, maybe it's actually a really good idea and a really good opportunity for us to take some of these tools we built and apply them to game studios. And so really the first step on that journey was thinking about what are the problems we want to solve, going back to kind of what I was just talking about with, identifying the problem. And so we talked to a lot of studios about the problems where they're facing just every day. So in terms of whether it be building NPCs for the game itself, building multiplayer bots, building bots that can coach players, using bots for QA testing. There's all these like different use cases that are kind of related to like the original vision of the company that we explored. And so after identifying those, we realized, okay, there's definitely a need here for a platform that makes it easy to build AI agents for games. And so that's what we started to focus on. And then we continue to refine that idea more and more. We started to do some use cases with studios, either building NPCs or building bots for like multiplayer bots and whatnot. Then over time, we kept refining that idea until we started to focus solely on QA testing for the most part. And I think that's really served us well. I think it's one of the biggest pain points that they've been facing, and that's kind of how we arrived at that. So we identified that was probably the biggest problem out of all the ones that we were exploring. And yeah, really how we got to that point was just talking with studios and building bots, and just seeing like what was the hardest thing to do. Really, that's sort of like been our philosophy is like, let's pick a challenge, a really challenging problem, and the more we work on it, the more we see that it is like a very hard research problem, which has been really exciting. And so there's just a lot of room to be, a lot of sort of gaps to fill as we explore the space. Lots of issues in building these bots for QA testing, and so that's been a lot of fun for us navigating that.
You definitely can't be adverse to change in our business.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of learning, especially because just the space of AI applications in games is, I mean, it's not like super new. I mean, obviously people have been building AIs for games for a long time, but in terms of how the current technology is, there's a lot of different ways that it can be applied. And so for us, like it is, uncharted territory. So it is a lot of learning, a lot of navigating, just everyday sort of problems that we're seeing in the game studio space.
You showed me a demo early on. It was so cool. You're showing me a little bit about the behavior trees, but you're showing me the demo of your bots doing work and sort of, I think it was, I could be wrong, but I think it was more when you were doing the accessibility testing. Was that the demo you were showing me? You showed me the bots going around and playing levels and stuff. It was cool, man.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been pretty cool, like just building out these automated agents, because typically it is pretty hard for a studio to go and like build out these systems completely and fully that makes it actually effective for testing. And so, it's always fun showing demos to people.
So, couple things come to mind though, right? So you obviously are saying then you kind of converge into QA testing. That's kind of the bread and butter at the moment. So what kind of, game studios do you have to go after? Because I'm guessing, newly minted game studios, they're probably not even thinking QA, they're just prototyping. So when is the right spot? When do you kind of catch them? And then if you do, you still have a big thing to convince them on what's the value adds. Talk to us about that hurdle.
Yeah, so for us, whenever we talk to studios, we found that pretty much any stage of studio is actually in need of some of these tools. Maybe less so like very, very small studios. Like if you're a solo developer or just a few developers, often testing is not as much of a concern. You're more concerned about just normal play testing to make sure things are feeling good in the game. But really anything above that definitely has a need. Like we see even small teams of like 5 or 6 people having sometimes like a QA person on team or outsourcing their QA efforts to someone else. And so so we're pretty much open to working with any studio, any game genre as well. So whether it be like a mobile game or an FPS or a MOBA, pretty much anything sort of applies to the product that we're building. And really for us, the best time to do automated QA testing is pretty much any time during the development process, but it probably is easier either at the very beginning or at the very end. For setting up these automated systems. If you do it at the very beginning, you can at least sort of see like some of the areas in your game where you can kind of support some of this automation. So it makes it a little bit easier to integrate. But then same thing at the end as well. If you have most of your game developed and you're starting to think more about actually testing it more, it's also at least a little easier then because you're not as busy with trying to figure out all the other parts of your game that you're prototyping. But yeah, so we worked with studios across like all different stages of the game development cycle. And in terms of like the value add, I mean, it's actually quite obvious to a lot of the studios you talk to that there is a value add. I mean, there's some studios that are doing very, very manual and repetitive tasks, in QA. And what's really sad sometimes is also seeing studios where you have like some engineers that are also getting tied up in the testing as well, where they need to be spending their time like developing the actual game logic, but they have to at least take like an hour of their time out of the day to actually do the manual testing. And so we've seen a lot of teams that are like very constrained in both manual QA and often have like no automated tests at all, even to begin with. And so a lot of them are just looking for some solution to kick it off. And so we see a lot of need in that space.
I imagine it's super helpful too for multiplayer games where a real person wants to test something but needs other players in there and doesn't want to rally the rest of
yeah. That's definitely a common use case we've seen where they have to like wait for other people to join, and that's why I think a lot of studios have like these dedicated play session times where the whole team come together and play test, because it makes it a little bit easier especially for multiplayer games. But it'd be great to have a tool that can just let you play those multiplayer games whenever you want, even when the team's not available. So
yeah.
And so one thing I would love to know, right? Especially for people who don't necessarily understand AI. I mean, a lot of people don't know what's happening under the hood, but there is obviously an element of, yes, a lot of things apply from game to game, genre to genre, right? But then there is also a lot of things very specific to the game. So how does your solution kind of balance that? Is that where AI helps it? Do you continuously have to fine tune, change things? So walk us through, how that process works.
Yeah, so for us, it all starts with like, what's the story around integrating our product and actually extracting data from the game to actually be able to build out these agents in the first place. And so at least for us, how our SDK works is that as soon as you add it, it starts extracting all the information from the scene of your game. Right now, we're working mostly with Unity. And so we can extract all the different properties and information from game objects within the scene. And I think what's really pretty unique about our product is that it doesn't require any custom code to do that. You just add the SDK and then you instantly start getting all that information. And so really the first part of the story is, how do we take all the information from the game and make it standardized so we can apply that to all of our different tools? So that's the first step. And then the second step is, we don't really tie ourselves down to like one AI approach. And when we say AI at Regression Games, we really mean probably the more like, probably the definition of AI from a few years ago, which is really anything from like very simple rule-based systems all the way to more recent approaches like deep learning or LLMs or things like that. And so for us, really the idea is, how do we take that standardized information and then be able to apply it to many of those different approaches? So whether you're building out a behavior tree or a rule-based system or trying to plug into an LLM, we have like these interfaces, or the idea is to have all these different interfaces that lets us integrate easily into the game. And so, of course, whenever you build like an agent, you're going to have to make logic that's custom to your game, of course. But the idea is, how do we like lower that friction and make it easier to kind of think about it on an abstracted level? That's a very common mistake we see with like some NPC development, is where they'll try to integrate an NPC in a very like tightly coupled way with your game. Makes it a little bit harder when you want to like update your game or update the NPC logic. It's a little bit tough to actually go and get it to do what you want. And so we try to encourage like some level of abstraction to make it a little bit easier.
That makes sense. But with that said, is there a particular genre or a game type that has still been way more difficult than others? Is there one standout?
Yeah, in terms of what's more difficult, I'd say not really a game genre, but it's more about like, what is the setup of like the state and the entities within your scene. And so, for instance, like one thing that we find is difficult for a lot of developers, but a little bit easier for our product actually, is like UI testing. So there's a lot of UI components, a lot of like information on the screen that you need to process. And so that's like one area we focused a lot on, was trying to support like games that have a lot of user interfaces. So you can imagine things like puzzle games or mobile games have a lot of those. And so we've been had some focus on that. Other than that, one area we're trying to focus on is pretty much any game where you have a character in some 3D environment. You imagine there's a lot of challenges with that in terms of just like doing navigation and working around terrain and trying to understand the scene in general. And so that one's also been a fun challenge for us, something we've been focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's kind of the focus, and you all shifted. How did the investors react to it? Were you like continuously keeping them in the loop that, no, you're navigating a space, now you found an area where you all want to kind of double down? How was the balancing act of keeping them in?
Yeah, so for me, how I mostly communicate with investors, like through either like this email or through like our monthly email update to them. And so they can see like kind of the trajectory of like working on our AI tournament platform. Then we're working on more sort of like tooling in general for a game engine, then working with studios. And throughout that journey, I mean, they've all been very supportive. I think we're very fortunate to work with some founder-friendly investors where they're very open to these sort of things. And of course, a lot of startups are always like kind of doing these micro pivots over time. I mean, if you're not doing these little tiny micro pivots over time, it's probably a bad sign. And so so overall, like I don't remember much in terms of like any like big comments about it. Just sort of like makes sense. Seems like a good direction to go in. And only have had a lot of support with it. So.
Yeah, I think what you said really resonated with me. Like literally, me and CJ were talking about this last week. That a year ago where Snapster was and what we were thinking, and now it's obviously based on the foundation, but it's way different, right? And you can't really imagine where you're at. No, I love this. So obviously we've spoken a little bit about investors, about regression. Where is this company going next? What are you excited about this year? But then there are some hot areas I definitely want to talk to you about, which is hiring, especially in this AI wave. How difficult that is. But let's start with where is regression going?
Yeah, so for this year, our biggest priority is just providing a lot of value to our current customers and also like newer design partners as well. So really, our goal is like how can we make sure we're just iterating as quickly as possible and building the features that we need. And so that obviously means working with customers and actually getting their feedback, showing them the product. And so that's something the next biggest priority for the next 12 months is just continuing to build and just build. And I think that also reflects in our team structure as well. We're all engineers in the team. Everyone's building, everyone's programming, and building out these tools. So that's definitely the biggest priority for us is just trying to build the best product possible. And then also over the next 6 months, definitely want to do a little bit of hiring as well. So right now we're hiring for 2 roles. One is for an AI and ML specialist, and then one is for someone who also has experience in game QA automation as well. So that's the 2 ways we're trying to grow the team, but mostly trying to keep it lean. Like we have a pretty small team right now. It's only 4 engineers total, and so we want to try to keep it small for the next year or so. And we actually have had a lot of really great results, just like having that initial tight team as well. So.
Oh, that's
what is your team composition?
Yep. Yeah. So the entire team, like I mentioned, is all engineers, and most of them are senior engineers as well. And so in terms of our company culture, we're all we can be very independent, but also very collaborative. And so we're all, brainstorming often, but we're able to kind of go off and, experiment, try new ideas and share that with the team. And that's probably one of the biggest parts of our company culture is that we're very serious about experimentation and prototyping, always trying to encourage each other to try crazy ideas and, see how they work, especially in the space of like automated game QA. There's a lot of like different research areas we can look at. There's, a lot of things within reinforcement learning, computer vision, deep learning, and then especially on the tooling side, like building data processing pipelines and different infrastructure for integrating with games and whatnot. And so, everyone is building. And one cool thing we actually have is Innovation Friday. So every Friday, everyone can work on whatever they want to, as long as it's like related to the company in some way. And so that's one way we kind of encourage people to, try crazy things, even if they fail. That's part of the learning process.
That's cool. Are all your engineers AI background, or are some of them senior engineers that are picking it up?
Yeah, so most of the team is actually senior engineers that are picking it up. So for myself, I have like an AI and ML background, but our company has like a wide variety of product work, whether it be in some of them have come from like point of sale systems at like Toshiba, for instance. Others have come from like Unity, actually working on like some of Unity's front end systems as well. And so we have like a pretty varied background, which I think has actually helped a lot for the product because, like I mentioned, like we're not really going from the standpoint of like, okay, we want to build an AI tool, an AI platform. Here's let's try to apply it to the problem. It's more like what are the actual things we need to build for this problem, and a lot of them are also not just AI, but also just the product around it. So things like you mentioned the data collection tools, the tools for actually defining tests and how we want to set that up and organize it. So there's a lot of non-AI work that is very important for the space as well. So.
And what an opportunity for them. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're kind of in the same boat here, which is Aaron. Like we both have spoken, offline or Slack that we've kept our teams lean, by design because we can move fast. And now, we're expanding, all are expanding. But hiring is so tough, right? In a startup, and especially in this in AI wave. And I know, you said you're not hiring all AI people, but I mean, some of the demands, some of the salaries are things not really a startup can afford. A lot of times it's not a culture fit. How are you navigating hiring? at
Yeah, so for
Regression?
me, I think there's a few parts to it that are really important for me to make recruiting successful. So one is just like the time spent on recruiting. That was a big learning I had early on when I started the company as well. That if you want to hire great people, you got to spend the time actually doing hiring. It's not enough just to post a job description and then just hope that people start applying and then that's it. It takes a little more effort than that. And so for me, I've been spending a lot of time just like doing interviewing, doing outsourcing, and just reaching out to people on LinkedIn who have relevant experience. One common strategy I use actually is looking at the papers that are relevant to our space and then reaching out to those authors and seeing if they're
Yeah.
interested. And so it really starts there with like in terms of the timing. And so back after spending a lot of time, you start getting a lot of folks coming in and can actually start doing a lot of interviews. For me, when I'm looking for folks, it's definitely a big focus on the cultural fit. Most of the people that are coming into the interviews, I can see from the resumes that they are going to be technically capable. So I'm less worried about that, even though obviously we have technical parts of the interview process. But for me, it's definitely a big focus on the culture fit. Like, are they going to fit within our very like fast paced and sort of prototype driven culture? Are they going to be someone that can communicate effectively with the team? Because we are all remote, like communication is very important to us. So we want to make sure that they can actually contribute to team meetings, make sure they're going to be active, like in how we kind of plan out the product and do brainstorming. And so that's probably the biggest thing for me is the culture fit. And then in terms of like the salaries or things like that as well, for me, my philosophy is just like, how can we find people who would still be a good fit? And if they're a good fit, let's see what we can do to get the job done in terms of hiring them.
Yeah.
And so often for me, like if they're going to be a really, really good hire, really key to like the success of the company, then, I don't mind, paying a little bit of extra. Right. But, yeah, kind of being upfront with them about like the expectations is also pretty important. So usually I try to avoid situations where we get far into the interview process with that, and then they realize, oh wait, it's not going to be a good fit
And
because of
then
that,
there's a
right? So
mismatch.
yeah, try to make sure to be upfront. And
Yeah.
I've always believed in a lot of transparency in the recruiting process, so I try to make sure to do that with them.
Yeah. What's been your toughest hire?
So I think probably
Is it
good.
sorry, what I meant was that you're all engineers right now. One of the things that the blind spot first time founders have in our past lives, we've either hired someone in our particular like I've hired engineers. Now we're talking to salespeople, we're talking to product managers. Has that been a learning curve?
Yeah, I think it has. So like so far I haven't really had to do too much like recruiting in that space, but I have thought a lot about it when I want to start that.
Yeah.
And I think the classic advice that people give, and I think I definitely see that now, is hire for a role that like you've had to do yourself so far, like as a CEO. I mean, as CEO, you're wearing many hats, and so like if I go and hire someone like in the sales space or marketing or whatever it may be, I've definitely have experienced like what that's like so far as a founder. Spending a lot of my time with that over the past year.
Yeah.
And so I think I have a better idea now of what to look for in a candidate like that. And so I'd say that's probably the number one thing is, yeah, before you try to actually hire someone, like really put yourself in their shoes for a few months, see if you can do the role, and then kind of go from there. But other than that, I think like for me probably the most difficult hire was just getting that very first hire in general. So because I'm a solo founder, I was kind of on my own for a few months after doing my seed round. So I think it was like maybe like 2 or 3 months before I did my first hire, and I wanted to make sure to really get a good first hire because that first one's just like so important. And so I spent a lot of time on that, and was lucky enough to get a really good engineer for that role. So
No, that's awesome, and I totally kind of second what you just said there. Moving on. So, all right, you're expanding, you're hiring, your investors are happy. You now have a path. How do you think about, do you even think about your next round? I know you've run your org frugally. Are you thinking about the next step? Is that on your mind or no? The focus is purely let's focus on the product. Let's get it better. Let's add more design partners. What's your
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
plan?
of course, as a founder, it's always on my mind, like, when are we going to do like that next round? But for me, I do think about it more as like, what is the progress we need to make before we actually even consider doing a next round? And so that's kind of goes all the way back to kind of my original remarks, like what's the focus for the next, couple of months is just keep building, keep focusing on, making our design partners happy and giving them value from the product. And so to me, that's like the best way to worry about what, the next round is just keep building, make sure that you're making progress on that front. So for us, it's a lot of planning around like what strategic partners can we make over the next 6 months? Can we And in our case, can we partner with more like publishers or maybe even like QA outsourcing companies, other studios, maybe
Yeah.
a range of like single A, double A, or triple A studios, whoever they may be. So that's definitely the biggest focus for me in terms of planning for that next round is having those strategic partners.
Yeah, and we're coming obviously towards the end of our podcast here. Where do you see regression? I know it's a very tough thing to answer, maybe because we live quarter to quarter, maybe month to month, especially in a startup, maybe week to week as we're shipping new stuff. Where do you see yourself and regression in the next 2-3 years? Do you have a vision where you're taking this
Yeah,
company?
definitely a vision. I think it's actually kind of an easy answer for this one is that I really want us to be the standard when it comes to automated game QA. What's very interesting about the space of automation and QA is that there really is no standards at the moment, especially compared to like what you see in regular software engineering. And so, I mean, if you're testing a website, you're probably going to be using like some popular, JavaScript testing framework. You're probably going to be using Cypress and Selenium and things like that. And there's like a lot of standards on how to get things done correctly. But in game QA, it's much more varied. There's really not many like solid thoughts on like how automation should be done correctly. Even at the larger studios, I'll notice that like they have some initial tooling that they're building out internally, but it's still like pretty bare bones as far as a whole automation framework goes. And so for us, I see this as like a real opportunity to really define like what is the way that people should be doing automated QA, and our goal is to have Regression Games be that way.
That's a very interesting thing you said, right? Like usually gaming is at the forefront of technology for all the other angles, but QA wise, you're saying testing has happened, or there were way more, like I guess, robust frameworks in the non-gaming world, and you want to kind of bring them over to the gaming side. So that's a very interesting thing that you said. Well, on that note, Aaron, really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. We really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. It's been a fun conversation, and hope you've had
Yeah,
fun
definitely
too.
did. Yeah, it was great chatting with you both.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks.